Welcome to a special edition of Doc Zone. I'm Anne-Marie MacDonald. Canada went into Afghanistan with the best of intentions. Liberate Afghans from a predatory regime and make the world safer from terror. Big promises. Are they being kept? It is a country balancing precariously between hope and fear. Hope felt by a little boy Canadian soldiers once saved. Hope in a remote village where a little money from Canada goes a long way. And hope for children who keep going to school despite the threats. Our cameras go deep into forbidden places to meet the Taliban and capture rare and dramatic images. We meet those who risk their lives every day to fulfill a dream, and two who pledged to be Taliban suicide bombers but got caught first. A journey into places seldom seen, stories of a people rarely heard. Canada spends more money rebuilding in Afghanistan than anywhere else in the world. Thousands of soldiers have served. More than 80 have died. Tonight we ask, is all this making a difference to the lives of Afghans? It is a dramatic and timeless landscape. Invaded and abandoned over the centuries, ravaged with brutal force. "31 million people, more than a dozen ethnicities. Young faces are everywhere. And nearly half the population under 15 years old. A new beginning is being written for the people of Afghanistan. What does the future hold for them? Friday, the Muslims' day of rest. Their noon prayers done, the young men of Kabul head for the hills and the skies for a graceful but ruthless sport. For Tufan Mukamel, this is a moment of pure joy.
The most beautiful or nice memories I have from Afghanistan, it's belong to my childhood. There was a peace in the city, and I love kiting, so I was able to kite on that time, playing with my friends.
And then everything changed. Forced into exile by war, he settled in Turkey and got a university education. He could have stayed away and done well, but when the Taliban fell in 2001, he came back, full of hope.
I was thinking that they will need educated people to reconstruct this country, and I wanted to be a strong person to rebuild and reconstruct my country.
Thousands of professionals like Tufan returned with dreams of rebuilding Afghanistan. They live in dreary places like this. The lucky ones have running water. Others must buy it from enterprising street kids who lug the containers up flights of concrete stairs. Tufan is happy to find a place for his new family here. This is as good as it gets for middle-class people. Little heating and only a few hours of electricity a day.
While you're single, you're just taking care of yourself. While you get married, you have to think seriously about your life and about your wife's life, and of course, while you have a child or children in the future, you have to plan about them, what will be their future.
Tufan left his country because of war, but what he's returned to can hardly be called peace.
Can you hear this? I think that this was another explosion or something. Could you hear it? There was shooting and there was a bomb.
Kabul is supposed to be safe, and yet this is the third suicide bomb this week. Thousands of people are flooding back to Afghanistan from refugee camps in neighboring countries like Pakistan and Iran. The villages they once lived in no longer exist, and there is no room for them in Kabul. So the government is giving them land for new homes. But there are hidden dangers under the ground. Afghanistan is the most heavily mined country in the world.
بخاطر از اینکه ماین در اثر آمدن سیلاب‌ها اونجا سرازیر شده، تغییر وضعیت کرده. بخاطر از اینکه ماین با تغییر وضعیت است، شما در اونجا حداقل از برچه استفاده نمی‌کنید. بخاطر از اینکه اگر برچه را چوب کنین شما با شکم ماین اصابت میکنه.
A team has been trying to clear this area, just an hour outside of Kabul, for months. They have already found over 700 mines. And here's another one. Canada has spent millions to fund these demining programs. It's painstaking work that requires discipline and concentration. Not a job for the faint of heart. They are trying to build a village here, not far from an American airbase. People are hurrying to finish their houses before the winter sets in, and they don't have much time left. After years of upheaval, they're just trying to settle into a normal life here. Mohammed Qasim and his wife Bobani thought this would be a safe place to raise their young son. They were wrong. Ghulam Reza left to collect firewood one morning and didn't return.
It was 10 o'clock when he told me that he was going to collect firewood. I said, "Don't go now. First, bring me some flour from the shop." But he insisted on going. People searched until late at night, but they only found him in the morning. He was dead.
Hundreds of people like Ghulam Reza are killed and wounded by landmines each year. But already there are plans to build another village nearby. There is no choice. Refugees need homes. So the urban planners are here with a new set of blueprints. All too aware that they are literally stepping in a minefield. The best guess is that 60% of the mines have been destroyed. It will take at least 5 more years to get rid of the rest. This is Kandahar. Afghanistan's second largest city is bustling and vibrant. People are enjoying their newfound freedom. This building used to house the much-feared Taliban Ministry of Vice. Now, it's a shopping mall. But this is where the Taliban first took power. They still hold sway in the surrounding countryside, and their influence is seeping back into the city. The South remains deeply conservative. No woman would dare step outside without wearing a burqa. But once safely inside the walls of a school, it's a different story. These young female students are only too happy to shed their burqas and the ideas of the past. This haven for 400 students is called the Afghan Canadian Community Centre, funded mainly by private Canadian donors.
Yeah, that date. You have to put that date here.
For 18-year-old Sahala and her friends, it is a chance their mothers never had.
I would like to brighten my future. I mean, I have seen our father and mothers. My mother, some of them are not educated, and they are in such in dark place. They cannot judge what's good and what's bad.
Today, 35% of the students across the country are female. A remarkable achievement in a country where not a single girl was in school 6 years ago when the Taliban banned the education of women. But even out of power, the Taliban are trying to turn back the clock. They have burned down schools and attacked students. One day, on the way to school recently, Sahala came across the corpse of a woman.
Somebody had killed her, and then they had thrown her there, and then there was a letter written in that if any other girls go to school, we will do the same situation to her. I mean, it's really scary.
Can you tell me what was in the next paragraph?
School director Ihsan Ullah Ihsan marvels at the courage his students show every day just by coming to class. After the defeat of the Taliban, he returned to Afghanistan with big dreams.
I did come with hope. At least I thought I would be free to give education to my fellow Afghans in need.
But that hope was fading away day by day.
A message posted on the school's website warned that he and his children would be killed. Death threats even come on his cell phone. So regularly, he saved the number so he knows when not to answer.
The increase of assassinations, kidnappings, robberies, briberies, and threats have added up to the fear of people.
Kandahar is a city on the edge. At checkpoints everywhere, police are always searching for potential suicide bombers. Knives at the ready, not as a weapon, but to scrape away anything that could hide a vehicle's deadly cargo. Scratch below the surface in Kandahar, and you can see the tension and fear that simmer underneath.
What I'm experiencing is a rising level of fear and paralysis on the part of the people that is just, it is palpable.
She first came to Kandahar to cover the war, but American journalist Sarah Chase never left. She started a small cooperative that employs 12 people making soap. Even for a short trip outside her gates, Chase feels safer in men's clothing. She has stood up to local warlords and the Taliban. That has earned her death threats and a bomb left next to her building.
I think it was set up to scare me.
Did it work?
Here I am.
Like the girls who dare to go to school, the women who work with Chase are challenging taboos, trying to build independent lives. And that puts them at risk. They sneak to and from work every day, fearful a suspicious neighbor, or worse, someone else might find out what they are up to.
They're being picked up by Taliban now in town who are posing as taxi drivers. They're being asked intimidating questions like, "What school should I take you to, lady?" What that question means is, you better not think about having any kind of independent life.
Convoys from the nearby NATO military base rumble through town regularly. Canadian soldiers on their way to another mission against the Taliban. With only a few hundred out on patrol at any given time in a vast and dangerous region, it's hard to offer much protection to the people. The few foreigners left rarely venture out of their well-protected compounds. Ordinary Afghans have to fend for themselves. In the past year, there were at least 6 kidnappings that went unreported to authorities because the families were simply too frightened to say anything. So Sarah Chase practices with her AK-47 by her bedside, learning how to load and reload with her eyes closed, in case terror comes knocking one night.
What we are seeing is a kind of scarcely visible fraying of the psychological fabric. And what that means is that then it tears at some point. You'll see a big rip.
Nighttime makes people nervous in the city of fear. But dawn always brings hope, and sometimes the promise of new life. In the new Afghanistan. In the heart of Kabul, Shafiullah Popal enters one of the top hospitals in Afghanistan. His son, Jamshed, is just another patient on the ward. But in Canada, for a time, they were in the spotlight.
The plight of the little boy whose heart valves were so damaged by rheumatic fever he couldn't take 2 steps on his own.
Jamshed was just 9 years old back in 2004 when his family carried him to a Canadian military clinic. dying from a weak heart.
We knew from examining him that he probably had something that could be corrected in Canada.
The Canadians flew the frail boy to Toronto for life-saving surgery. His father always by his side.
I have hopes from the God, and I hope from the Canadian medical technology, and I'm sure that my son will get well.
Jamshed became a symbol of what Canadians hoped to do for Afghanistan.
Thank you, Canada. Really, really thank you. Thank you.
This is Jamshed today. He's 12 now, and his memories of Canada are still vivid.
Thank God we had the chance to go to Canada.
The operation saved Jamshed, but he has a chronic heart condition. He'll need regular hospital checkups and medication for the rest of his life. This is the only hospital in Afghanistan that can treat him. But it's costly. His family has spiraled deep into debt. Jamshed gets the all clear to go home, but it's a dangerous place. When he and his father first returned there from Canada, thugs beat Shafiullah to a pulp, angry at his contacts with foreigners.
One of them grabbed me. He shouted, "You are a Canadian, you are a foreigner."
Shafiullah doesn't know if his attackers were Taliban or not, but they have threatened him again.
I am sure you'll hear one day that they've killed us.
چی خوب جای باشه خوب جای نیست از کجا شد امنیت که نباشه مکتب نزدیک نباشد خوب است
Jamshed leaves the hospital knowing he will have to come back, clinging to the hope that he, like his country, will get better soon. The international community is trying to do something about the desperate state of healthcare in Afghanistan. The average Afghan lives to be only about 46. Almost 1 in 5 children will be dead before their 5th birthday. For women, the situation is dire. There are few female doctors, and many Afghan men won't allow a man who's not a relative to see his wife or daughter.
There's still a huge taboo in Afghanistan, in particular in the South, to having male medical professionals treat women. So that means that your wife has to be just about dying before you're going to be willing to take her to the doctor to have her examined by a male physician. And usually by that time it's too late.
For pregnant women, the consequences can be tragic. When Amina gave birth to a healthy baby boy 3 years ago, she was lucky. 1 in 8 Afghan women die in childbirth, the second worst rate in the world. Amina wanted to help change that.
I was 18 years old when I got married. My husband encouraged me to go back to school. I studied nursing for a year, and then I decided to become a midwife.
She's about to begin a 17-hour shift at the local hospital in Bamiyan. It is one of the most remote places in the country, and one of the toughest for pregnant women. If they can get here, they're in luck, because Bamiyan's maternity clinic is as good as it gets in this country. It's run by the Aga Khan Health Services. When Amina reports for work, it's busy. Today, she has to pay particular attention to a woman going into labor.
آفرین نفسای عمیق بکش. اوکی کی جان از بینیخ نفس از بینیخ بکش از دان خویلو آفرین سوالی بانم نه ترت نباشن سوالی کمانده شا.
Midwives can be crucial in saving lives, so Canada and other countries are spending millions to train women like Amina. There was no midwife in this woman's village, so she had to make the difficult trip here. She has just lost her baby. It happens all too frequently in Afghanistan. Dr. Uzra warns she should avoid another pregnancy for at least the next few months.
تابلت‌هایت میخوری با 3 ماه بعد میایی و من قسم دیگه دوایت میخوری و در خانه یک ذره از خوراکای استفاده میکنی که بر تو خوناور باشه مثلا سبزیجات میخوری میوه‌جات میسر شو بیچگوری شوی
باز ما اجازه مادر نداریم خانه از مادر بعد 1 ماه دیگه منطقه از من برف میزنه که دیگه کس خانه پشت ایت نمیتونه
تو نمیشه کدام کلینیک مثلا در نزدیک خانهت باشه که باز
یه چیز
نمیتونی نزدیک خانه
یه مادر نمیشه.
This is the kind of frustration Dr. Uzra faces every day.
Most women don't eat properly. They get pregnant regularly, which results in anemia and low energy. And some families won't bring their women here until the problem is complicated.
Like most Afghan women, Hanifa had never given birth in a hospital before. Her baby was premature. Born too early because Hanifa did too much hard physical labor. It's a common problem. The number of infants dying in their first year is still high. But that is slowly changing. With better care and more access to inoculations, almost 50,000 more survive each year now. At the end of a long, hard day, the patients are still coming, but the doctor has gone. Now, Amina's the one in charge.
تیری خوشو خو من در دیت شمار کنم خو آفرین
The baby is coming much faster than expected. The temperature has dipped below freezing, but there's no central heating. The only warmth will come from a wood stove.
او دست خرم از اینجا بگیر مادر جان او دست خرم از اینجا بگیر آفرین نفس بگیر خب نفس درد که داشتی نفس بگیر نداشتی نفس نکش خب بیا 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 آفرین آفرین بیا 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 آفرین خیر است زور بزن نفس بگیر در خلاص شد نفس بگیر از بینک نفس بگیر آفرین 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 بیا بیا آفرین 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 بیا 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 آفرین بیا تمنا بگیر آفرین
It's a boy, and he's healthy. Since training programs began, about 2,000 new midwives have graduated. It's a good start. But 4 times that number are needed. When we return, danger for the man who knows too much. Corruption is so pervasive in Afghanistan these days, it is almost part of the landscape. Tufan Mukamel found that out the hard way. When he returned to Afghanistan, he started a small construction company. But he soon discovered that doing business here has its hidden costs. He landed a road contract, finished the job on schedule, but then he hit a roadblock. A top government official asked for a $10,000 kickback.
For a small project like 4-kilometer road, if you give $10,000 bribe, it means it's a big amount. While they asked for $10,000, I was really shocked. But as an Afghan and as an educated person, I never let myself to give bribes because I am really against this.
Tufan paid for his principles. He had to wait months before seeing a penny of the money owed to him, pushing his company to the point of collapse. It's the same story everywhere. In Kandahar, Sarah Chase struggles to keep her soap cooperative alive, completely exasperated by the petty and rampant corruption she faces.
Every government official at every level is busying himself, filling his pockets with the riches of Afghan people and the Afghan country. And it is literally every interaction with a government official you are shaken down.
Where do people turn to complain? The police? They are paid so little. Many resort to bribery and extortion just to get by. The courts? Even senior judges are poorly paid and easily bought. Some say the highest bidder wins the case. Corruption in the justice system became such a scandal that President Hamid Karzai appointed a former Taliban official to clean it up. Mullah Muhammad Qasem Halimi and his investigators photocopied marked US bills, then followed their trail right into some judges' pockets. They wiretapped and photographed judges suspected of accepting bribes.
We have caught 20 people red-handed, 20 judges and administrators in 1 year. They have been tried and convicted, and they are all in prison now. This in itself means that we are paying a lot of attention to this.
But some people are so powerful they seem untouchable. Many poor Afghans see the extravagant new mansions of top government officials and warlords as evidence of unending corruption. It undermines their faith in their own leaders and in those who support them.
Basically, they feel sold out by the international community, the ordinary people do, because they recognize that these officials we are the ones who installed them. It's no good to say we're here to support the Afghan government and then close your eyes about what the Afghan government is perpetrating on Afghan citizens.
Yaqub Ibrahimi wanted to expose corruption and injustice, so he decided to become a journalist.
Freedom of speech and freedom of the press are the foundations of democracy.
But the 26-year-old never imagined where his passion for the truth would lead. There is a lot more freedom in Afghanistan today than there ever was under the Taliban. Newspapers and magazines are flourishing. A new awakening for a people silenced for so long. Young journalists get support and training here at the Institute for War and Peace Reporting, which publishes their work on the internet. Jean Mackenzie is in charge. Yaqub is one of her rising stars. She warned him to be cautious.
If you want to cover corruption, if you want to cover any of these issues, you could face very direct and very brutal reaction from the people you are trying to expose.
But Yaqub was determined to take on the most powerful people in Afghanistan, the so-called warlords, regional leaders with private armies known for their brutality and lawlessness. Some are now in government.
I found out that even the courts are controlled by warlords. If someone goes to court because a warlord violates their rights, the courts always rule against them. This has created thousands of victims.
When Yaqub published his story, accusing some warlords of kidnapping, rape, even murder, he expected trouble, but he was surprised at where it came from.
I had received a number of threatening telephone calls after the article was published. Even government officials called me, complaining that I'd made the government look weak.
Yaqub's expose angered the government. National security agents searched his office, his computer, his notebooks. And they gave him a warning.
They said, "We will deal with your family. The international community can support you, but they can't protect your family."
The threats were real. Authorities didn't touch Yaqub, a high-profile journalist. They went after his younger brother, Parvez, a university student. The authorities claimed he wrote an internet article about women and Islam, and then charged him with blasphemy, one of the most serious crimes in Islamic law. Senior religious leaders then met with President Karzai's government to demand the death penalty. Weeks later, after a secret trial without a defense lawyer, Parvez was condemned to die. And despite international pressure, he still faces execution. When Yaqub began his career, freedom of speech and the rule of law seemed possible. It hasn't turned out that way for him. His brother's arrest has left him disillusioned and bitter.
When the Taliban were in power, at least there was no bribery. We had high hopes the international community would bring law and order and give people human rights. But now the innocent receive the death penalty and the guilty walk free.
Do you mean that you'd almost rather go back to that time?
No, that was bad. But now this is worse.
When we come back, flak jackets and bodyguards. Just another day at the office in Kandahar. Canada spends more foreign aid money in Afghanistan than in any other country. More than $1 billion promised since 2001. But this is a story about how hard it is to get the most basic aid to the people who need it. Much of Canada's attention is focused here, in Kandahar, one of the most dangerous places in the world. Canada's strategy? Send in the army, back it up with aid. Here, aid workers like Drew Gilmore have to think like soldiers. These days, the flak jacket is standard gear when you're working in development. This is his to-do list. Villagers need everything from clean water to schools, and the Canadian government has given him close to $5 million to make that happen.
Assalamu alaikum. No, sit down.
Gilmore runs a private company called Development Works Canada.
Singay, how are you guys?
The guards and drivers he hires are not from Kandahar. They come from other regions. It's the only way Gilmore can be sure they won't be infiltrated by the Taliban.
What about security? What teams are we taking for security?
Gilmore has been helping 5 villages around Kandahar. The plan is to visit one today. Some of the guards will go ahead to make sure the road is still safe. This is the time of maximum danger, traveling in areas where you can't tell who is Taliban and who is not.
I want to keep my eyes on the road here.
He takes different routes each time, not in big armored SUVs that make easy targets, but in ordinary vehicles, more discreet and less dangerous.
Echo 1, go number 2.
Okay.
This area was once a major agricultural hub with thriving villages and productive land. But war and drought put an end to that.
Well, welcome to Majburabad, population 5,000, 19 tribes, and one of the most progressive villages in Canberra. Oh!
As the friendly face of Canada, Drew Gilmore is supposed to spend money here, but he's not prepared to be a pushover. Today, village elders want him to agree to a new project.
You want this irrigation for free. No risk from you, no risk of money, yet you get all this beautiful land.
It's a difficult meeting.
They have the people, but they need the money to clean up the canal.
I'm just trying to understand. I'm just trying to understand.
Gilmore has to make sure that money spent here will benefit all the villagers, not just the leaders.
Everyone has the right to water and clean sanitation, but agriculture irrigation is business, it's income, it's investment. No one has the right to that. We have to discuss what we can do and what you can do.
But his desire to spread the money around doesn't go down well. One man says, "This kind of talk reminds us of communism, and we used to kill the Russians." The negotiations stall. But they agree on another project for now, and a contract is posted outside the mosque for all to see. That way, everyone knows what's been agreed to. Gilmore always expects trouble from the Taliban, so he is always on the alert, his armed guards never far away. But he believes the best security is economic recovery. There are plans here for a bakery, perhaps even a metal shop, small businesses that will be sustainable. Give people hope, and they have less reason to fight.
I think a lot of people tend to think of Afghanistan in terms of a conventional war. But I think that's the wrong way. It's really a war on poverty. The enemy is unemployment, it's ignorance, it's misery. And I think that if we provide infant generation, that itself will enable the community to stand up on its own 2 feet, avoid the temptations from going to insurgents or participate in the poppy trade.
These days, everyone worries about the war-torn South. But no one seems to care about this place. 400 kilometers to the north is an oasis of peace, the province of Bamyan. Abdullah Barat doesn't have millions of dollars to give away. He's got a few hundred. The money comes from church basements and private donors in Canada and Norway. But in an isolated region, a little aid can make a big difference. There are no real roads in these mountains and valleys. Most aid agencies can't be bothered to make the trip because it's so hard to get there.
In winter time, we come by horse, by donkey, sometimes by walk. So a lot of donor agencies don't want to come by donkey or by horse or walking. So it is a problem, really.
You are watching Afghanistan, between hope and fear. In this hour, Our cameras go deep inside rebel territory where the Taliban have taken charge. Inside the mind of a suicide bomber. These young men were prepared to die for the Taliban, but got caught. And keeping hope alive. 3 people who dream of a better future face fateful decisions about their lives. Abdullah Barat lived in Ottawa during the Taliban years. He came home as program director for Future Generations Canada, a small non-profit development group. His goal? Bring solar electricity to 5 tiny villages. Right now, they rely on oil for lighting their lamps. And if they run out during the winter, they're too far away to get more. Coming here is like going back in time. Like most of rural Afghanistan, the needs are basic. Barat calls Amina his engineer. She and her husband have been trained to install and maintain all the solar equipment. The idea is to make the community self-sufficient. The solar panel they install today will cost only $600 and should last for years. Electricity will bring not just power, but some income to these remote villages. Women earn money here by making carpets, and for the first time, they'll be able to work after the sun goes down. The light is weak and dim, but when fully charged, it will transform their lives. This is Abdullah Barat's reward, a solemn speech from the village elder. This village is typical of Afghanistan. Rural, poor, forgotten. Barat is frustrated by the neglect he sees.
And even you go to the village, it is the same people was saying this kind of thing. A lot of men come to Afghanistan, and the villagers said, how much has come to our village? Maybe sometime nothing. Unfortunately, a lot of this go to administration. You see a Land Cruiser of an NGO, and the same thing, their office and their guard and their driver and their staff and computer and internet connection. And sadly, it's very little will go to the project.
The international community has spent $15 billion in Afghanistan so far. But Afghans complain not enough of it is getting to the people who need it most. And that spells trouble. When we return, how allies become enemies. In a country where many feel abandoned by their government, betrayed by corruption, the people at the bottom feel even more dispossessed. The despair runs deep here in Lowiala, a sprawling slum in Kandahar, just a few miles from Canada's main military base. 100,000 people try to eke out a living. Little of the foreign aid that has poured into Afghanistan trickles down here. It's a dangerous area where the Taliban have made deep inroads. The police prefer to stay on the edge of the slum, content to screen people heading into Kandahar. On the streets of Lowiala, what is striking is the open nostalgia for the days of the old regime.
Karzai cannot do anything to help us. Under the Taliban, wheat and everything was cheaper. Now everything is expensive.
During Taliban rule, young people had work. In my opinion, the Taliban should return. I pray for their return.
500 kilometers away, at NATO's central command in Kabul, they're trying to stop the return of the Taliban. All too often, the flags fly at half-staff because a soldier has been killed somewhere in combat. At the Ops Center, they monitor the growing number of Taliban attacks across the country. You might expect their only concern here would be defeating the enemy on the battlefield.
Who is the enemy?
But listen to how Jim Farron, Canada's Director General of Military Intelligence, describes the war.
Is the enemy that 18-year-old boy who's illiterate, has no job, has no money, or is the enemy the unemployment? Is it the illiteracy? Is it the corruption? Those social factors that are put together that create the conditions for the insurgency.
A Taliban comes up and offers him, let's just say the equivalent of 10 Canadian dollars or 10 US dollars, to plant an explosive device or participate in an attack. That's a lot of money to him. That's going to feed his family. So he takes the money and he fights, because to him, we're the invaders.
Brigadier General Farron realizes that winning the war here is not just about guns and tanks. It's also about the hopes and fears of a people deeply distrustful of outsiders. Take the problem of the poppy fields that dot the countryside. Afghanistan provides more than 90% of the world's opium. And to a struggling farmer, harvesting poppies can be the difference between survival and starvation.
Say a Canadian patrol comes in and he believes that you're there to eradicate his poppy. He's going to pick up a rifle along with his sons, his brothers. So are they Taliban? They're combatants. They're attempting to kill our soldiers, but they're not driven by a fundamentalist ideologies.
In the turmoil of war, it is far too easy to turn potential allies into enemies. Troops on patrol never know if around the next corner lies a friendly face or a bomb. Last spring, American Marines on patrol in the eastern city of Jalalabad came under attack from a suicide bomber. Only one soldier was injured, but then all hell broke loose. The Marines opened fire randomly. Avdur Mohammed saw it all.
I was on my way to the fields in the morning when I heard an explosion and then scattered shots. My sister-in-law was hit here in the back. She fell down dead. Then 15 days later, her little baby boy also died because he was being breastfed.
Not far away, Haji Diwanai managed to survive, but just barely. Gunfire riddled his car, wounding him and killing his father, his nephew, and a third passenger.
This is a piece of the back door. This is how they killed people. The Americans were attacked 1 kilometer away from here. Why did they kill the passengers in the car?
When the mayhem was over, along a 16-kilometer stretch of the highway, 35 civilians were injured. 12 lay dead, including several women and children.
This happens all the time. It happened in Jalalabad. It happens pretty much once every month or two in Kandahar. And every time, people's patience wears a little bit thinner. In other words, people are willing to accept one mistake or two mistakes. They're not willing to accept a mistake a month.
The Jalalabad firefight sparked angry protests. NATO commanders insist they do everything to avoid civilian casualties, but resentment still builds.
Why was I shot? Why do you kill people who were walking on the streets here? Then you say, I am sorry. Well, that is not good enough. Now, if I go to Europe or to Canada and kill people, and then say I am sorry, will you forgive me?
As anger grows, it becomes easier for the Taliban to find new recruits. Like these two young men, who tell the story of why they went on a suicide mission for the Taliban. Here in southern Afghanistan is where the battle lines are drawn. Canadian soldiers keep a wary lookout for an enemy that could be anywhere, everywhere. Making Kandahar safe is Canada's job as part of the NATO coalition. And it's a dangerous job. The enemy is a lot more sophisticated than it used to be. A movement that once banned TV now churns out slick propaganda DVDs, conveniently subtitled in English. In their mountain hideouts, the Taliban listen to jihadi anthems on their cell phones. And journalists regularly get text messages from the Taliban announcing the latest prison break by one of their commanders. Or emails with the latest photos of an attack. It's hard to penetrate the propaganda. In an attempt to get a glimpse of life with the Taliban, we gave out cameras to Afghans who can travel safely deep inside the Taliban strongholds.
This is how it works? Basically, it's just simple.
One camera was carried into the snow-covered mountain bases deep in Helmand province. Another camera filmed their ammunition caches just outside Kandahar. The images that came back are rare and disturbing. They portray the power of a resurgent Taliban. This is not what the Karzai government wants you to see. The other Afghanistan. In large swaths of the south, the Taliban operate, in effect, a parallel government.
Hey, Taliban!
On a dusty road in Helmand province, a Taliban checkpoint. Nobody gets through without their permission. In what in effect is a Taliban government office, citizens dutifully pay their electricity bills. They patrol the roads. For our cameras, they display their latest prize, a captured Afghan police vehicle. Ideal, they claim, for sneak attacks on government outposts. The Taliban also impose their own laws, welcomed by some as an improvement over a corrupt Afghan justice system. This man, accused of theft, is brought before a Sharia court, where a strict interpretation of Islamic law could mean his hand will be chopped off. But he is found innocent. Others are not so fortunate. The Taliban say this man was one of 60 alleged spies they captured early last year. They executed 17 of them in a single week, hanging them from trees.
They are terrorizing the populace, forms of kidnapping, executions, hanging. So it's not by winning their support through hearts and minds or for providing a viable form of governance. It's not that at all. It's through fear.
And it's working. 6 years after being driven from power, the Taliban have returned with surprising force. Not enough to take over Afghanistan, just enough to wreak havoc. Far away from the Taliban hideouts where we filmed, the Canadian soldiers who lay their lives on the line know just how deadly the Taliban can be.
Let's go, Bravo! Oh, for fuck!
This footage from an embedded journalist captures a Taliban ambush in July 2006. The Red Devils from Edmonton fight it out in Helmand province. A Canadian soldier died in this battle, one of so many, in a war that by most accounts is not going so well. These UN maps show the sweep of the Taliban. From 2006 to 2007, the high-risk areas in red have increased dramatically to almost half the country.
We have a stable environment.
But Brigadier General Jim Ferron disagrees with this grim picture.
They do not rule, they do not control the area.
NATO insists the north, west, and east are largely trouble-free,
When we look at the southern area, we're talking...
with most of the insurgency confined to only 10% of the districts in the country.
I firmly believe that the security situation in this country is improving. There are those people in this argument that will say, you're losing the war, you're losing the conflict. I view it exactly the opposite.
UN maps say they're losing. Military maps say they're winning. The dispute about what is really happening can be told in the story of one road. Highway 1, the vital link between Kabul and Kandahar. The Americans spent $200 million paving it, and U.S. Army Colonel Dave Anders insists it's safe to travel.
People travel that road every day, constantly. I have traveled that road many times. Now, of course, you know, as a U.S. soldier, I'm in an up-armored Humvee, and I'm traveling with a lot of coalition soldiers, and a lot of Afghan soldiers.
You won't find any armor-plated vehicles here at the taxi station on the outskirts of Kabul, where passengers leave for Kandahar. Businessman Syed Aga has to travel regularly.
There are problems 100% of the time, and those who claim there are no problems on the highway, that is absolutely a big lie.
At the other end of the highway, in Kandahar, weary travelers feel lucky to have made it alive. How many of you have been stopped by the Taliban? The men in this taxi are asked.
Taliban told us they will behead us. They said, if you work with the government, then we will certainly behead you.
It's not just the main highway that is insecure. The capital, Kabul, is growing more precarious. In January, terror struck deep in the heart of the city. The target? The luxury Serena Hotel, favored by foreigners. 7 people were killed by Taliban attackers.
When I saw the woman fall to the ground, I thought, this is real, this is serious, and I very well might die tonight.
Lisa Gans, an American aid worker, barely escaped when the assassins gunned down a hotel guest standing next to her.
The Serena Hotel is where you go if you want to feel like you're safe, and it was considered the hardest target to hit in Kabul. So by hitting the Serena Hotel, they've made every other target seem completely vulnerable.
And there will be more targets, as Taliban spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid vowed in a cell phone interview for this documentary.
We have planned more attacks in Kabul because a lot of foreigners live there. If you become our target, then you won't be safe anywhere and anytime from attack, no matter where you are.
Those words are all the more menacing, because behind the Serena bombing lies a new breed of Taliban commanders, younger, more violent, with dreams of a global jihad. It is a war that no one is winning. An alliance of the most powerful Western armies seems powerless against a foe that few expected to be so tenacious. The stalemate has forced the government in Kabul to offer some kind of peace talks to the Taliban by reaching out to people like this man.
And solution is not war. And if we are fighting for 10 years or for 20 years, eventually we must come negotiation.
Back when he was the Taliban's outspoken ambassador to Pakistan, Mullah Zaif used to talk a lot more war than peace. Nowadays, he lives under house arrest in a rundown neighborhood of Kabul. Released after spending 4 years in the Guantanamo Bay prison, Zaif calls for his former comrades to stop fighting and start negotiating. But few of them are listening.
I am not able to tell them. I am not able to convince them the jihad is not jihad. And if they are telling me to come, join with us, but I will tell them I am tired. Please leave me.
This former Taliban commander is also trying to talk peace. Abdul Salam Roketi is now a member of parliament. Roketi earned his nickname by being so effective with rocket launchers in the war against the Soviets. But now he says it's time for the Taliban to lay down their arms.
My message to the Taliban is that they should pursue peace and join the government. You can't wash away bloodied clothes with blood.
So far, the Taliban have been more interested in killing him than talking to him. These days, Afghanistan's rocket man doesn't go anywhere without his bodyguards. The time for talking may have slipped away for now. The older generation of Taliban fighters has been replaced by a younger, even more militant leadership. After their defeat in 2001, the Taliban found refuge here in the mountain regions that stretch along the Afghan-Pakistan border. Pakistani journalist Saeed Salim Shahzad has trekked into the area many times to meet with the Taliban. He recently traveled to a guerrilla camp in eastern Afghanistan. What he found were well-armed insurgents, led by a new wave of young commanders, often the sons of Taliban elders who have grown up with nothing but war.
Actually, I was struck that a completely new generation in their 20s was in front of me. And they were very ambitious, they were more violent, and their strategies were very radical compared to their fathers back in 80s and 90s.
Young hardliners like Siraj Haqqani, a rising Taliban leader so elusive, all the authorities have is a sketch of him. He was raised in an al-Qaeda training camp in northern Pakistan, the son of a legendary Taliban guerrilla leader. But the young Haqqani has bigger ambitions.
Siraj has taken on a much larger role and does not see himself in the tribal role that his father did. He's taking on a much broader scope. He is influenced greatly by al-Qaeda and by their tactics and is financed by al-Qaeda.
One consequence of that al-Qaeda influence: suicide bomb attacks in Afghanistan on a scale never seen before. The Serena hotel attack that shocked the world was, according to Afghan authorities, the work of none other than Siraj Haqqani and his network. How do the Taliban entice people to become suicide bombers? In a secret detention center in Kabul, we found our way to two teenage prisoners.
My name is Zamir Ullah, and I'm 18 years old.
My name is Misbauddin, and I'm 16.
What's disturbing is how crude and effective their recruitment by the Taliban was.
We live in the mountains and don't have any education. The Taliban convinced us that by doing these types of activities, we will go to paradise.
They didn't say anything about politics. They didn't give us any money. They just said that we have to make jihad, the holy war.
Misbah was strapped with a vest filled with explosives and told to walk into a police station. Zamir was to drive a car into a government convoy. But they both balked at the last minute.
When I saw the car full of explosives, my heart told me not to kill myself for this.
The first time, they were frightened, but not enough to stop trying. The next time, one of them shot and killed a man. The other was supposed to detonate a car bomb. They got caught and now face years in prison. Suicide attacks are for cowards, say the older fighters like former commander Abdul Salam Roketi, who has nothing but disdain for the new Taliban.
Our war was different from their war. We were prepared to sacrifice our lives by confronting the enemy face to face. They are hiding far from the battlefield in Pakistan and send in suicide bombers to kill people.
But why should the new generation of Taliban leaders give up now, when they are convinced their war is going so well? Just 35 kilometers from Kandahar city, this commando group shows off their ample weapons stash. They are busy grooming the next generation. The sons of the Taliban. Child soldiers only too happy to die and kill for the cause. I want to make jihad, says this 10-year-old. Not that far away, in downtown Kandahar, a mosque the Taliban hoped to build as a symbol of their power stands half-finished and desolate. Now the question is, will they return to finish the job? And is there anything Canada's military and money can do to stop them? For every sign of progress in the new Afghanistan, there is a stark reminder of failure. 6 years after the Taliban, is life getting any better? Can its people finally overcome decades of destruction? Far from the spotlight, some Afghans are quietly making a difference. These men and women work for an Afghan government reconstruction program. Canada has contributed more than $50 million through the World Bank to this, but you won't see a maple leaf or a Canadian face here. Every morning, a fleet of trucks sets out from downtown Kabul and fans out in every direction. In Kabul province alone, they are in 500 villages. There are no armed guards or flak jackets. Even though this team works in some dangerous areas, it relies entirely on the local villagers' goodwill for protection. Project manager Mohammed Waiz says the villagers choose the projects and how the work will be done, right down to using donkeys instead of trucks.
The elders told me that the money that they spend using donkeys goes to the villagers and stays in the village. If they rent a truck, then the whole load will be done in one trip, but the money would leave the village.
Because they spend nothing on security and pay local wages, a little money goes a long way. Good preparation for the day the international community finally goes home. At Kabul University, students are learning the skills needed to help build their country. But keeping them here is a problem. Life abroad is tempting. Roman Sarwar studies psychology. He talks regularly with his brother in Saskatoon. Roman and his friends worry about their job prospects in a country where unemployment hovers around 80%.
If people have connections, their relatives work for international NGOs or ministries. Even without qualifications or higher education, they can get a job more easily.
They often talk about leaving.
When my brother sees how we live here, he gets really worried and sad. He's constantly trying to sponsor us to Canada because the situation here is deteriorating day by day.
Tufan Mukamel has been trying hard to succeed in the construction business since his return to Kabul. But life here is wearing him down. Many in his family have already left.
Now I really feel alone in this country because all of our relatives, they left Afghanistan and they're living in different countries in Europe, America and Canada.
Tufan's been forced into exile before. He's thinking about it again.
I didn't lose my hope, but of course, if I cannot do anything for these security reasons, if I cannot do anything for my people or for my country, then why not I save my life and my family lives, my son life and my wife life here. And yes, of course I will.
When we come back, 4 people who have to make fateful decisions. The new Afghanistan is hardly a safe haven for its citizens. Life has become even more precarious for Ihsan Ullah Ihsan, the director of the Afghan-Canadian school in Kandahar. In February, the Taliban kidnapped his brother and uncle, but he vows not to be intimidated.
But I'm proud that I'm working for a right cause, for a noble cause, for freedom, for democracy, for the rights of education, of human development. For that, if I sacrifice my life, I'm proud I'm doing that.
Journalist Yaqub Ibrahimi is still fighting to save his brother's life. But as the days go by, he wonders whether he'll be forced to flee Afghanistan, as he reveals in this letter.
Dear friend, my situation gets worse day by day. I've been receiving threatening calls. I'm also being followed. I'm not staying in one place every night because I no longer feel safe. Very best regards, Sahid Yaqub Ibrahimi.
In Kandahar, American expatriate Sarah Chase is still determined to make a go of it, but sometimes finds her situation absurd.
I mean, at some point it's like it almost becomes comic that, okay, we're trying to make soap in a war zone, right? It's 6 years after the fall of the Taliban. We have electricity today for the first time in 3 days. How can you think about putting a country on the road to recovery when productive economic activity is impossible because there's no current?
And what about aid worker Abdullah Barat? He keeps looking for donors willing to pay for small projects in the remote villages of Bamyan. He says he came home from Canada on a one-way ticket and has made a commitment to stay. He hopes others will follow his lead.
The commitment is we have to finish the job. It is not Afghan problem. It is every human being problem. It is not just saying, okay, I don't care, I'm not from Afghanistan. I'm from Canada, or I'm from England, or I'm from the United States. But as being a human being, it is everybody's problem. And we have to do something here and finish the job and make a strong Afghan here, and then we can live.
And that's the dilemma for Canadians. In a country like Afghanistan, where people are suspended between hope and fear, who will ever determine when the job is done and the time has come to leave? The Canadian government has decided to extend the mission in Afghanistan to the end of 2011. But there are conditions. The government is demanding that NATO send in 1,000 more soldiers to help in battle zones like Kandahar. Canada is also hoping to shift efforts toward rebuilding and training rather than fighting. If you want more information about the money Canada spends in Afghanistan or about the stories we presented tonight, please go to cbc.ca/docs. This has been a co-production with our colleagues at Radio-Canada. A French version will air April 16th. Thanks for watching this special edition of Doc Zone.
love.